今ネット界では今世紀最大の対立が起きてる。そう、オナキン肯定派 VS オナキン否定派で、ぶっちゃけた話、世の中の9割 9.5 割、とりあえずその辺歩いてて道すれ違う男は全員オナニーしてる。で、全員オナキンなんて意味ないと思ってる。もしくはオナキンの存在すら知る。世の中はオナニーを OK としろ、世の中はポルノを OK としろ、そしてなんならお前に勧めてる。で、それによって多くの男たちがどんどん弱ってる。これ間違いない事実だと思うんだよね、俺的には。間違いない事実だと。今日はスタンフォード大学、スタンフォード大学ですよ。天才たちが集まる大学を教えてる天才、脳科学者であり生物学者のアンドリュー・ヒューマン氏と、トロント大学教授心理学者のジョーダン・ピーターさん、この2人をねゲストとして呼びました。今日はねその2人のポッドキャストをわざわざね和訳してみんなに届けるんで聞いてってください。ということでスタートします。
So I can see where you're going on the pornography.
Right. So I was starting to get a lot of questions. I was kind of surprised. I thought, well, I'm male and, maybe that's why they feel comfortable asking. But people were saying we're asking about pornography, and they were asking, I realized we want to, I'll just be direct about it. They were asking whether or not masturbation was bad. They were asking whether or not masturbation with ejaculation was particularly bad. And here's my stance on this. I'm a biologist and a neuroscientist, not a psychologist. But what we know for sure is that if an individual repeatedly engages in this circuitry, let's say masturbation and pornography, with increasingly potent forms of stimulation that are on a screen, a couple of things happen. First of all, what's being reinforced? What's being reinforced is a high dopaminergic response to watching other people engage in sexual behavior, which is very different than being in a first-person sexual experience. Okay, so right there, that what's being reinforced is not actually any kind of improvement in communication skills. It's voyeurism. And as these questions started to come in more and more, I started to realize there was a lot of kind of undertones of people talking about fear of or experience with sexual dysfunction that clearly pornography can lead to. So, and then you start to think about, okay, what happens in the cascade or the arc of sexual arousal and orgasm? What happens is that initially there's it's parasympathetically dominant, meaning if somebody is too stressed, they actually can't engage in sexual behavior. The arousal response doesn't occur. Erection is blunted. But the actual orgasm response and ejaculation is strongly associated with the so-called sympathetic nervous system, which has nothing to do with sympathy. It has everything to do with, it's a kind of a stress response. And then it reverses to a parasympathetic response. And a hormone called prolactin increases dramatically after ejaculation in males. What does that do? That blunts dopamine release and testosterone for a very long period of time. Masturbation and pornography are potently tapping into the dopamine system and can undermine the very processes of what I consider healthy processes of finding a mate, dating, communication, eventually, if it's appropriate, sexual interaction,
well, it also sounds like it's
etc.
undermining pair bonding.
And pair
bonding. So here's
俺がずっとやってきたことだよね。それは自分でオナニーして気持ちよくなってたら、人がセックスしてるのを見てオナニーして気持ちよくなってたら、その現実世界で実際の彼女をゲットして、セックスしようっていう努力ができない、努力しなくなっちゃうんだよ人間は。でそれが多くの男たちに起きてることだって、第三者として他人がセックスしてるのを見て興奮するのがお前の習慣になってるわけじゃん。それが一番気持ちいいわけ、お前にとっては。だから自分が実際に外の世界に出て女の子をゲットしてその子とセックスしようっていうモチベーションを奪われて当然だよね。でそれを彼が今ちょっと難しかったけど、プロラクチンとかさ、テストステロンとかその辺の用語を使ってちょっと難しかったけど、簡単に言うとそういうこと、でそれが実際に起きてるよね。これ否定できないよね。でもう数字にも出てるから、過去の男たちと比べてポルノオナニーのせいで、ポルノオナニーのせいだとは完全には言い切れないけど、だけど過去の男たちと比べて今実際の世界、現実世界でセックスできてる男たち、パートナーを見つけることができてる男たちは超減ってるんだよ。なんでだと思う？何が考えられる？近年で発達したものは何？どっから原因が来てる？これだけ多くの男たちがポルノ依存症、オナニー依存症で、それで実際にセックスできている人たちがめちゃくちゃ減ってる。そこに相関関係があるのはほぼ確実って言えるんじゃないかなって俺は思うよ。
Question: if you're seeking sexual release through pornography and you go through the whole cycle and you get a prolactin release, do you bond with yourself?
So this is very interesting. The biology explains it as what's left there is a kind of an open loop, a kind of an emptiness, right? Because bonding with the self is a complicated notion. I mean, there's a healthy version of that, of course, loving oneself and self-reference. But in the absence of a real partner there, of an absence of real sexual partner, there's an open loop of neurochemicals, including oxytocin and prolactin. The dopamine, remember, dopamine goes up during pursuit, anticipation, then peaks and then crashes below baseline after orgasm and ejaculation. So it depletes the dopamine system. And it's likewise in drugs of abuse and addiction, it eventually depletes the dopamine system. Initially, there's a huge dopamine surge with drugs of abuse like methamphetamine and cocaine. But over time, people are using more and more to achieve what is not such a great high.
これも多くの男たちに起きてることだよね。何度もしこっていくことによって完全にドーパミンが枯渇する。もう何もやる気起きない。外の世界実際に出て何かしようと思えない。自分の体変えようと思えない。自分の収入アップしようと思えない。でどんどんその努力なしにハイを得るっていう行為だけが悪化していく。見てるポルノの刺激がどんどん上がっていくね。いやそりゃ普通の世界でセックスできなくなって当たり前だよね。うんね。この問題によって多くの男が今勃起不全、ね、勃起すらできない。俺も経験したことあります、恥ずかしいこと言うけどあります、俺オナニーしてた時勃起できなかった。女の子目の前にしてまともな勃起できなかった。ポルノ見てたせいで本物の女性に対して興奮できない脳みそになってた。
Kind of consumption of energy drinks. Like people are taking more and more chemicals within their energy drinks and they're thinking about loud, fast music, energy drinks. It's kind of stacking of dopaminergic tools. Now that's not as pathologic. In fact, there are some energy drinks I'll occasionally drink and I enjoy them. I don't think we need to be entirely afraid of pursuing or engaging in things that release dopamine. Obviously, healthy sexual behavior, food that we love, social engagement, all of these things can be dopaminergic. It's the big peaks in dopamine that are not associated with any prior effort or organization of self that are particularly dangerous for the human being.
Yeah, well, you could see that's a cardinal danger of affluence. Then
that's right. This is why the children of
you know
that's right.
You cannot get rats addicted to cocaine if they live in their natural environments.
Is that right?
You can only get rats addicted to cocaine if they're isolated rats in a cage. Yeah, they won't bar press for cocaine in a natural environment, and it's because they have alternative sources of dopaminergic gratification.
There's an additional issue with pornography, which is not often discussed, which is that
これも俺が毎回言ってることだよね。部屋の中に閉じこもってて何もやることなかったらそれはしこるよって。反対に外の世界出て自分の人生生きてって自分のやるべきことやってたらそんなしこらないって。でヒューバーマンシーちょっと言及してたけどドーパミンが全て悪いわけじゃないんだよ。悪いのは努力なしに瞬間のハイを得られてしまうドーパミンなんだよ。
Remember, guys in particular, the brain is a learning prediction machine. And I'm not trying to say that all pornography is bad, but there are good data to support the idea that if your brain learns to be aroused by watching other people have sex, it is not necessarily going to carry over to the ability to get aroused when you're one-on-one with somebody else, right? Especially young kids who are consuming a lot of pornography, the brain is learning sexual arousal to other people having sex.
So you're going to program yourself into being a voyeur,
or just create challenges in sexual interactions with a real partner. Right?
Mary Harrington has the 3 laws of pornodynamics, and the second law of pornodynamics is the law of FAP entropy. And it says that whatever you start out with
FAP entropy
progressively more intense over time.
And here I'm approaching this only through the lens of biology, right? I'm not a psychologist, and I'm certainly not political in any way. At least not, I have ideas about politics, but I just don't discuss them publicly. But the idea here is that, I'm not saying pornography as a stimulus is bad or good. What I'm saying is in its availability and its extreme forms, it's a very potent stimulus, and very potent stimuli of any kind, extremely palatable food, extreme pornography, extreme experiences like bungee cord jumping, those set a threshold for dopamine release. And Anna will tell you that, and I'm sure she did, that the higher the dopamine peak, the bigger the drop afterwards. And it's not that you drop to baseline, you drop below baseline. Again, it's not, these things aren't good or bad, they just have to be controlled in a way, because when people are pursuing dopamine peaks over and over and over and they aren't getting them, typically it's because they've been pursuing that activity far too often.
And you're saying perhaps take a break from that and there may be an ability for yourself, your system to reset.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in theory, all the things that we're talking about with pornography could be superimposed onto food or could be superimposed onto real sex, right? That one also has to be cautious there, right? But the cycling back and forth between dopamine and low dopamine states, dopamine fasting as it were, but maybe just low dopamine states, these are natural rhythms that exist in the nervous system. We have to remember what the dopaminergic system is there for. I'll say it again, I wasn't consulted at the design phase, but we know as a generic form of motivation and pursuit. You can imagine the human or the animal that's hungry or thirsty. It needs energy to go pursue the thing. So the idea that you have to eat in order to get energy, that's true, but you need energy in order to get the thing to eat. So our nervous system has energy also. That's dopamine and epinephrine. Yes, we use glucose and glycogen, etc. when we're pursuing things, but the idea here is you're pursuing something and then either by smell or by sight, you think you're on the right track. So you go down that track and then, there it is. You get some berries or you get, let's get prehistoric about this, or you get to kill the prey and eat it. And then it gives you energy to continue this pursuit or to reproduce. I mean, there's a reason why humans and other animals seek out reproduction is that every species, but certainly humans, have two innate desires built into them. Whether or not they decide to actualize this or not is the desire to protect young and make more of its own species. Every successful species does that. Even if people don't have children in general, people care about children.
いかがだったでしょうか要するに彼が話していることはそのポールのオナニーが脳みそに与えてる影響ね。何が起きてるの？何を学習させてるの？自分の脳みそに。他人がセックスしてるのを見て興奮してオナニーして気持ちよくなる。毎晩のようにいとも簡単にワンクリックするだけで瞬間のハイが得られる。過剰なレベルのドーパミンが得られる。それがお前の脳みそに何を起こすのか、お前の人生に何を与えるのか、お前のモチベーションにどう影響を与えるのか、実際の世界で理想の自分を追求する意志をどれだけ削るのか。冷静になって考えたらそれはそうだろって分かることだと思うんだよ。でお前も分かってるはずだって。分かってるはずだよ。いいわけがないじゃん。キューバも話も言ってたけど、オナニーしても空虚のループにはまるだけなんだって。空虚のループで過去の動画でも話したけど、一切オナニーするって言ってるわけじゃない。失敗しちゃう時もある。おだけに失敗しちゃう時もあるし、どうしても抑えきれない時も あってもしゃあないと思う。で週1ぐらいだったら全然そこまで問題ないと思う。週1、2週間に1回で月に 3,4 回ぐらいだったら問題ないって。そこまでだけど問題なのは抜けば抜くほど体にいいんですよってね、勘違いして抜きまくることなんだって。1日に3回4回5回もう本当に中毒状態に陥ってるやつなんだって。毎日のように抜かないと気が済まないやつなんだって。今回の動画で少なくともお前のやる気、お前のモチベーション、お前のドーパミンのシステムに悪影響が与えられてるってことは理解できたんじゃないかと。これは事実だ、ね。オナニーが好きでしょうがなくて認められない人もいるかもしれない。どうしてもこの事実から目を背けたくなる人もいるんじゃないかと。それが唯一のお前のアウトレットなのかもしれない、ね。唯一の気持ちよくなれる瞬間だからどうしてもギブアップできないのかもしれない。だけど人生において後々現実突きつけられる前に今真正面から受け止めて取るべき対策を取っていくべきなんだと思う。真剣に話してるわ。ってことで気づいておきこそやらなきゃいけないことでございます。じゃあ。